strong as he was at the time that the war began in February last year. Is there any truth, Srinjoy, to the claim or any credibility to the theory that this might also be an attempt to rally support around Vladimir Putin?
Yes, this could be a way of rallying support. There is no dispute about that. The point, however, is that, yes, after the Russians said that they would want more people and so on, there a lot of people, according to Western reports, have fled Russia. A lot of young men who could have been called up for the war have fled Russia. Many have gone to Kazakhstan, many have gone to other countries, and so on. So there is naturally no one wants to go to war. No one wants to fight in a situation like this. In fact, a lot of prisoners have been pulled out of jails and they have been sent to the front. All of that is quite important.
We'll see how the situation evolves, Srinjoy. We also have, for the time being, Colonel R. Singh with us, and Mr. Abhijit Iyer Mitra also joins us, strategic expert. Colonel R. Singh, coming to you first and foremost, how do you read the situation now that there's been a claim from the Russians that there was an attempt to assassinate Vladimir Putin? What do you think this means for the war now?
No, this is an inflection point, and I suppose the war will take a very ugly turn hereafter. I mean, they started off saying it is, the Russians at least said this special operations with limited objectives, and then it escalated. And now the escalation has reached a point where you are trying to assassinate. I mean, if that is true, allegedly, if you are trying to, assassinate the head of the state, then obviously, I mean, the repercussions are going to be very heavy. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And, there's a huge, if at all this has happened, I don't know, then I think this is hardiness on part of Zelensky and his supporters in the West.
Well, if at all there is truth to the claim that this was in fact an assassination attempt, let me take this across to Abhijit Iyer Mitra as well. What's your take on this entire matter, Abhijit Iyer Mitra, and how do you read the Russian statement which says that we reserve the right to take retaliatory measures?
Thank you. So you remember Ukraine has demonstrated the capability to carry out assassinations in Moscow. If you remember, Daria Dugina, the daughter of the famous Russian philosopher, was killed a few months back in a car bombing. And there have been Ukrainian bombings in and around Moscow for quite some time. Now, targeting a head of state is highly problematic because it's effectively a declaration of total war. I'll just recollect two episodes for you. If you remember when President Bill Clinton discovered that there was an Iraqi plot to kill his predecessor, George Bush Sr., he launched a full-scale missile strike on Baghdad. Also remember, our retaliations against Pakistan have been very except, of course, when Parliament was attacked. When Parliament was attacked, there was a full-scale mobilization and near war on the border. So, attempting to kill a head of state brings about a whole different kind of war, which is going to be very, very serious. Now, when they say they've reserved the right to retaliate, by Russian standards, they have been relatively, restrained, only targeting energy infrastructure and things like that. I think this could see a whole different level of escalation in the war.
Okay, let me take this across to Colonel R. Singh. Colonel R. Singh, if Russia reserves the right to take retaliatory measures, is Zelensky's life in danger now?
No, up till now, I may say that the Russians were not, putting behind their capability as far as, kinetic weight of, of their conventional power is concerned. I think if he's saying that if we reserve the rights to retaliate, it can take any form. It can take any form, and it is no guessing that Putin's credibility is at stake at the moment. If this has happened and he doesn't retaliate, then his credibility of stake. Don't you agree?
Yes, in fact, Mr. Iyer Mitra, the claim, a theory that's also being floated, is that Putin is facing a lot of domestic opposition to the war that he initiated against Ukraine, and that this could possibly be an effort to actually rally support around him, galvanize the public around him at a time when support for the war and support for him might actually be dwindling. How do you see that theory?
See, I agree entirely with General Singh because we don't, see any great protests or whatever in Russia. There are in fact much bigger protests happening against Macron in Paris than we've seen against Putin in Russia. So, we need to take these reports with a big pinch of salt.
All right.
If there is growing resentment in Russia, then it's certainly subcutaneous and subdued. What Colonel Singh said, which was very accurate, was that Putin's credibility is now on the line, and this merits a whole different level of escalation. The question is, in my reading of the Russian nuclear doctrine, this still doesn't, merit a sort of nuclear response, but it does merit a leadership targeting, which means, places like the Verkhovna Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament, the presidential palace and all, because so far, Russia has avoided targeting the elected Ukrainian leadership. I don't think that will be the case anymore.
All right, Mr. Mitra, as well as Colonel Arasan Singh, please stay with us. We also have Mr. K.T. Fabian joining us, a former diplomat. Mr. Fabian, how do you read the situation now evolving in the Russia-Ukraine conflict amid claims by the Russians that there was an assassination attempt on the part of the Ukrainians against Vladimir Putin?
Well, my view is that I will make only two observations. One is that
Abhijit Iyer Mitra, if you're still with us, I just wanted to ask you, how do you see the responses now coming from some of the closest allies of Ukraine who've been trying to, in fact, supply it with all kinds of state-of-the-art equipment to combat the Russians? They've not intervened directly so far. I'm talking about the NATO allies. What do you have to say about what their response is likely to be in the event of a Russian escalation?
Look, there's very limited options that the West has. They've actually exhausted all their levers on Russia. The problem of, using all your levers early in the war is you have very few levers left to prevent escalation later on. So they've kind of boxed themselves up. They can't intervene in this directly. So there's very little they can actually do now beyond what they've already done. I suspect what their best response is going to be is to start a sort of information campaign. Now, look, we don't know. This might be Putin. There might have actually been an attempt on him, or there might not have. Just like we don't know if the Iraqi attempt on George Bush Sr.'s life was actual or if it was contrived. But what will happen now is you'll see a very systematic Western campaign to say that this is fabrication. Outside of that kind of information warfare, I really don't see what tools and methods the West has right now to deter or force the Russians to de-escalate.
Colonel Arasan Singh, coming to you now. If there is a Russian escalation, what kind of an escalation might it actually entail?
No, I mean, what the West had to do, it has already, supplied 62,000, heavy category weapons. That includes almost 39 fighter aircraft, 44 helicopters, almost 575 tanks. About 700 towed guns, 125 multiple...
Colonel Arasan Singh, I'm so sorry, I need to interrupt you because we have a member of parliament from Ukraine, Sviatslav Yurash, who's joining us. Mr. Yurash, thank you for speaking to Times Now. The Russians claim that the Ukrainians want to assassinate Vladimir Putin, that they've launched an attack to that effect on the Kremlin. How do you respond to this allegation?
If there is any person on earth that deserves the death penalty and the treatment that the criminals at Nuremberg trial got for destroying the world in their attempt to conquer it, it's the man who is trying to destroy the world in his attempt to conquer it. Mr. Putin has killed numerous thousands around my country. He has displaced 10 million at least He has destroyed regions, not just in Ukraine, mind you. Syria is on his bloody hands. Many places in Africa. His involvement in Venezuela is also very poignant. I mean, the reality is that Mr. Putin's life here is not something that I would try in any way to safeguard in terms of any kind of policy. In terms of claims that this is our drone and all that, I mean, the claims Kremlin has made are plenty. It's very hard to exactly pin the reality at this moment.
But is it beyond the realms of possibility that the Ukrainian government might be looking to assassinate President Vladimir Putin of Russia? Are you ruling out the possibility of any involvement on the part of your government in this particular attack alleged by the Russians?
I mean, the reality at hand, it's very early to comment. I haven't seen any statements made by any spokespeople by our government, and the reality is that when you look in situation, it's very hard to exactly claim or disown or this, that, and the other. I mean, the reality is we are seeing the footage you are showing right now on the fact that Kremlin is not impenetrable. That we are showing the whole world that Mr. Putin, for his crimes and for all that he has done, should face any kind of threat or problem. But the reality is that as far as involvement by our government and anything of that sort, it's very, very early to comment.
It's very to comment, but you're a Ukrainian member of parliament, so you're not ruling out the possibility that the government might have attempted something like this?
At this moment, I only say that I wish Mr. Putin would have died a long time ago and left my country to choose its own destiny, which we are fighting for. And I wish Mr. Putin would not be a menace. He is not just on Ukraine, but on world peace, time and time again. And I wish there was no Mr. Putin for your prime minister to tell him that this is not a time for war. I mean, the reality is very simple. Mr. Putin does not deserve to continue on in any capacity.
Mr. Yurash, the Kremlin has basically said that it reserves the right to take retaliatory measures. And what kind of a retaliatory measure do you now anticipate? It's a direct threat coming from the Russians to the Ukrainians.
Russians were threatening and claiming to be exactly